everybody. Hello, hello, hello. I am coming on today. For those of you who know, I sent out something and I wanted to talk today about balance. I wanted to talk about boundaries. So I'm going to wait a little while, just a few minutes until we get some people on. If not, it'll be a replay. It's all good. But I wanted to talk about something that I believe a lot, many of us struggle with. Um, and oftentimes we struggle with this whole idea of boundaries. And, a lot of times we think, when we think of boundaries, because it's true, but what I'm about to say, when we think about boundaries, we think about saying no to people. And that is so much a part of establishing healthy boundaries in our lives. But I think, you know, another part of that is knowing when you're good and knowing when you need to change some things, or knowing when there are some things about you that has to be addressed. And I'm gonna get into that soon. But I just really wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what we think boundaries is, and then kind of have a conversation about it. Whenever for those of you who know, I am a therapist, so I spend a great deal of time, working with both men and women as it relates to the challenges, when it comes to like the challenges in their lives. And I love what I do. I love the honor of, being alongside of someone during their journey of figuring things out, and whether it's growing in their relationship with God, or simply growing in their own relationships. I love that God has given me the passion and the desire and the platform to be a part of someone else's journey. And so I definitely don't take for granted that part. But I am a therapist, been a therapist for about 11 years, have been in the field for over 20 years. And so, a lot of times when it comes to, really getting through the challenges in our lives, we oftentimes face that question of, what have I allowed to happen? Or what are the choices in my life that has brought me to this day? And so that is the place that I really, want to go to, as we talk about this whole idea of boundaries, because I think that part of our journey has to do with us making choices, whether those choices are quality choices or whether they are poor choices. But oftentimes when we look at our lives, we only have ourselves. Hey, Stacy. We only have ourselves to really kind of ask that question of, why did I get here, right? Why did I even get here? So let's talk about boundaries. So, boundaries has a lot to do with, of course, what you allow and what you don't allow. It also has to do with your ability to be able to set your priorities, and also, your ability to draw a line in the sand as it relates to what you will allow and what you won't allow. And sometimes I find that we often put too much on ourselves, and we don't we don't properly balance our decisions in our own lives. I think that there are times when we kind of bite off more than we could chew, and then we get in the thick of things and become overwhelmed and and tired and frustrated, and resentful, and oftentimes it's things that we have created. It's from our own doing. And so, a great example for me, as it relates to when we talk about boundaries and balance, it really has to do with, that person that has a lot going on, maybe, and I'm just going to give my example, for a few. Okay, I am married, I have kids, I work a job, I have a business, and people are asking me to do things, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So my schedule, I'm starting to put stuff on my schedule, right? And so I'm putting something on my schedule for 4 o'clock, for 5 o'clock, for 6 o'clock, and then I'm gonna put something on there for 7:15. Now here's the deal. I have not incorporated driving. I have not incorporated what's going on with my kids. I haven't incorporated what I'm doing. I haven't incorporated anything into this schedule that I've developed. But yet I've, placed myself, in a situation where I have to meet each one of these responsibilities because I said it, and the struggle that I've had with that in the past is, I'm at this point now I have an appointment at 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I'm struggling. I'm kind of busy and beeping the horn, get out the way. I'm, all excited and sweating and flustering. Why? Because I put too much on my plate. And it's like, how many times do you put too much on your plate and then, become frustrated and overwhelmed, and, you wind up missing something. You're late picking up something, or you're late for an appointment. Hey, Jatan. And it's just one of those things where it's like, why did I do that to myself? I have 4 hours to do something that really takes about 7. But why would I do that? And so when I think about boundaries and balance, not only is it about having the ability to say no to other people, but it's also about recognizing your capacity and choosing to live within your capacity, right? And so every day when I am, working with people, boundaries is something that comes up with Lottie Dottie and everybody that I talk to. Whether it's men, whether it's women, whether it's individuals, or, whether it is in couples counseling, wherever it is, boundaries and balance is always an issue. So when we start talking about ourselves, like what kind of boundaries do you set for yourself? What is the line that you draw? Let's look at our time. Is there time in your life that, is there a time in your day or in your week that is only set aside for you and no one else is invited? Is that a boundary for you? Is it a boundary for you where you say, project? Have you set that draw? Have you ever drew that line in the sand and you're like, okay, I have 5 projects. I'm not going to take another one. And then someone comes along and you say, okay, I'll do that too. Right? Now, the problem is they didn't hear your commitment to yourself. So it's not like they're trying to suck you dry. No, because they don't know what's going on. But you do, or I do. But oftentimes what we do is we just add more and more and more on our plates. And then when it gets too much, we're frustrated, we're resentful, we're upset, we're irritable. And then something falls, or something gets, left undone, or someone is disappointed. And really, the victim in us will say, Well, people want everybody wants something from me. Everybody's pulling from me, and I'm just one person. That is the victim. That is that whole victim mentality that we often play because we want to blame somebody. And some of us may say people are always pulling on me, and that may be true. It may be true. But the other half to that is you have not made a commitment to yourself that you kept in that specific scenario. So you see the difference between that. Like sometimes, we walk around like, oh, everybody's always pulling on me. I'm trying to be everything for everybody. And so the check is, why are you doing that? What gratification comes with you being everything to everybody? Is it because you need to feel needed? Is it because you just lack organization as it relates to being able to effectively prioritize your time correctly? Like, what is it? Now, again, when I talked about boundaries, a lot of times the first thing people think about is, yeah, I have to say no to some folk. That is true. But what I'm talking about today is, what do you have to reorganize in your life? What is it that you have to do to begin to think about what choices you're making? So you say, how do I keep the commitment? Well, part of, what we have to really think about is, why are we even making the commitment if you know you can't do it? Or, and that's why I said a few minutes ago, we have to understand our capacity. What is your capacity? And I think what happens is, day by day and year by year, we go through life not understanding what our capacity is. When is enough enough? When do I stop adding stuff on my day? When do I get to a place where I really recognize this is what I can handle, right? And what I can't handle, I'm going to have to do it this way. So I'm looking at, so I want you to really think about that, because that piece is going to deal with the commitment piece. So first thing is being able to understand your capacity, being able to look at, this is what I can do and this is what I can't do. This is what I'm willing to do and this is what I am unable to do. The commitment to yourself comes when you first and foremost recognize what your capacity is. A lot of times we'll say yes and we haven't even looked at our schedule. Have you ever done that before? Like somebody asks you something and you're like, okay. And it's like, but you don't even know if you can do it yet. Maybe, there's other things that you're doing on that day. Or maybe it's, you got to count the cost in terms of how much time is it going to take you to do what you need to do. Give yourself more time to do that. Give yourself the time you need, which means a lot of times we can't make decisions on the fly, but we have to take some time in our decision making so that we can count the costs. Because when we count the costs, then we'll understand whether or not we have the capacity for it. And I think that also goes with us making commitments to ourselves. You got to be honest with yourself. Is this something that I'm going to do? For example, I might know that I need to exercise and I need to lose weight. And so I might say to myself, okay, I'm working out every day. I'm working out 7 days a week for an hour. Well, I have to ask myself, do I really have the capacity to do that? Does my schedule allow for me to work out 1 hour, 7 days a week? Maybe I can't do that, but sometimes we make commitments and we bite off more than we can chew. And it's nothing wrong with starting small or taking baby steps until you have the capacity to take on more things. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's really about balance, and it's really about understanding what your capacity is. So, before you make that commitment, think about whether or not you can do it. Think about whether or not you want to do it. Think about whether or not it's the time for you to do it. And then make your decision. And sometimes we do things, and I can definitely attest to this, where we do things and we do them because we have to, because we feel like we got to make this money, so I got to do this. And then there are some times where we have to sacrifice, and there are some things that we sacrifice for a season or for a period of time because there's a goal that we have to accomplish. But make sure, even in you sacrificing and you accomplishing that goal, that you're pacing yourself. And so one thing that I have, really made a commitment to myself is I'm not going to say I can do something unless I know I can do it, and unless I want to do it, and that's just something for me. If I say in my, if I say that I'm going to write a book, or if I say that I'm going to, I don't know, start a business, I'm not going to say that, right? I'm not going to say it openly until I've counted the cost, and until I've decided that it's something I want to do or something that I'm going to do. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Like, getting to a place where if I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to say it. Because what happens is, we say, how many times have you said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and didn't accomplish any of those things? We make promises to ourselves before we count the cost. And I'm talking about as an adult. I'm not talking about, if you're a kid and you're like, when I grow up, I want to do this or I want to do that. Well, at that point, you oftentimes don't have the capacity to count the cost. But I'm talking about as an adult. And we make these plans and we say that we're going to do all of these things, but yet we don't follow through with them. And what I am, suggesting is maybe it has to do with your capacity. Maybe it has to do with your commitment, right? Maybe it has to do with your competence. So, so what that means is, am I able to do it? Do I have enough knowledge to do it? Do I really want to do it? So sometimes you have to ask yourself all of those questions. And if the knowledge is the problem, before you commit to doing something in a certain frame of time, do your research. But we're talking about prioritizing. We're talking about, really getting to a place where you are able to, to set boundaries in your life, to create balance. There is a quote that talks about how balance isn't something that just happens. It's something that you create. And so in order for you to create in order for you to create balance and develop healthy boundaries in your life, you have to do the work. You have to be willing, to not exceed your capacity or exceed your ability to, to really accomplish something. If you can't do it, you can't do it. And even as it relates to being able to reevaluate, because there are times where we think we could do something and we may set out to do it and then recognize, what? I can't do it this way. So then at that point, you need to reevaluate, not keep trying to make something work that can't work. Because that's the other part of setting boundaries, is knowing when we've reached the limit and being willing to say, you know what? let me go back to the drawing board and let me reevaluate this thing. Maybe I need to go at it a different way. So it's not that you are forsaking your commitment to yourself, but it might just mean that you have to, kind of look at how you can do it differently. You might have to re-strategize, or you might have to be open and flexible to different ways of doing things. But more importantly, being able to go back to the drawing board and say, let me look at this in different ways. That is another way, that you can really look at capacity and competence and commitment. When you kind of reassess, there's nothing wrong with reassessing commitments that you've made to yourself. I said I was going to do this, but let me go back and see if it's really reasonable, or if there's another way to do it. And so, all of these things has to do with balance, and all of these things has to do with you really being willing to admit what your capacity is, understanding whether you have the competence for something, and also really assessing your commitment level. How dug in are you? Are you willing to take this thing through the long haul? Are you willing to persevere through that? And so one of the with the subtitle that I gave to this is how to get it done when you're done. And I put that there because sometimes we have allowed ourselves to become so overwhelmed in situations, and we're just done. Have you ever been in a situation that you checked out emotionally in, but you're still there physically? But you've already really checked out, like you're done, right? But yet you're still in that situation or that scenario. And I think that that's what happens sometimes. Like, we allow ourselves to become so overwhelmed because we did not prioritize, because we did not say no, because we did not assess our capacity level, and so now we're done, and we're just like resentful, we're irritable, and we're just like ready to see it no more. And I put that there because we cannot allow our emotions to really take us away from our commitment to ourselves. And so sometimes we got to get to a place where we are willing to deal with the emotional side of us. Deal with that so that you won't abort the process. Sometimes we are too darn emotional. Okay? We get emotional, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, now that we're emotional, we're upset, and we're going to just abandon everything we said we're going to do. As opposed to just going back to the drawing board, reassessing those 3 C's, our capacity, our commitment, and our competence. Reassessing and then starting over. One of the things that I love about our lives is that we can start over whenever we want to. It doesn't take away from the consequences of choices and decisions that we've made, but what it can do is help us to refocus. It can really help us to think about, okay, let me just start this thing over again. And that's the great thing I love about living. As long as we have breath in our bodies, as long as we have the energy, right, to move forward, we can always start over. Or we can always reassess. But when you're in your feelings, right, we abort the process, which means we walk away unfulfilled, upset, like we haven't accomplished something, and we are down on ourselves. Like, have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt like, you made a commitment to do something, that only you knew about? Something happened, you got in your feelings, and then you were like, bump that, I'm not doing it no more. Hey, Charles. Hey, Nakia. Think about it. Have you ever done that? Like, have you ever just like in your feelings and you just like, I'm done, not doing it no more. It's over. And that's, and I'm going back to the whole, when I talk about this subtitle in terms of how to get it done when I'm done. Because we got to learn how to bounce back. We got to learn how to be resilient. We have to learn how to bounce out of our emotional roller coasters. When we talk about living and growing and breathing, we got to understand that none of those things are actually gonna happen unless we continue with our efforts, unless we are in the game. Like, sometimes our head isn't in the game, right? This whole game of life, our head isn't in it because we're too darn emotional. And so part of what has to happen is we got to get out of our hearts and be more in our head. There's a balancing act to being in your heart and in your head. There's a balancing act to that. Some of us live too much in our hearts and not in our heads. Right? How many of you are too much in your heart? Your feelings. You're too much into your feelings. How many of you are doing that? Because if you are, you got to work that thing out, because you got to learn how to balance. You have to learn how to live in your head and live in your heart. There's nothing wrong with having emotions. It's nothing wrong with being emotional. You just have to know when. When is it time for me to be emotional and deal with my feelings? And when is it time for me to live? When is it time for me to grind and accomplish my goals? It goes back to, my mantra, triple G living, God goes and grind. All of those things have to be able to work and, have to be working in order for us to live fulfilled lives, in order for us to really, accomplish the assignment and the task that God has placed us on earth to accomplish. And so when we think about balance, when we think about boundaries, right? It's really about, it starts with us. It starts with our internal world. What are your boundaries like emotionally? What are your boundaries like, mentally? What do they look like? Are you able, do you know when you've taken on too much? Do you know what too much looks like in your life, not in anybody else's? Do you know, as a business owner, do you know when you need to say no to business? Do you know when you need to, say yes to business? Do you know when enough is enough? Do you listen to your body when your body says it's time to shut down? Are you able to recognize when your body is telling you to shut down? And so that's the thing that, we really have to think about. We really have to think about, do we know how to do that? Hold on, guys, 1 minute. So when we start talking about, with those boundaries, those internal boundaries, as it relates to what is it that I'm doing that's really putting, more stress on me than I need. And so I saw someone said now feeling overwhelmed. And so, part of this whole thing of boundaries and balance, it has to do with you making a commitment to yourself not to do that. Now, life is life. And, there are times when we're going to feel overwhelmed. There are times when, we're going to have a lot on our plates just because of our obligations and things like that. But I believe that even when, there are many responsibilities and many obligations, I believe that we can still, really be intentional about balancing our lives, and that is the key, to what we're talking about as it relates to boundaries. You have to really begin to become honest with yourself about your capacity and about your competence and your commitment level. What does it look like? And a lot of times, I talk about how we are so committed and, so on point when it comes to other people, but then when it comes to ourselves, we are not as in tune and we are not as motivated to commit to ourselves. And I understand that that's something that many of us are faced with. But what I want to talk about tonight is just how we can become intentional with, with balancing our lives, which is simply has nothing to do with anybody else but you. Because again, we talked about how oftentimes you have a tremendous amount of obligations, but the people that are asking, sometimes, of course, sometimes. Now, the people that are asking you to do things, they may not always know everything that you're being faced with, but you do. And so sometimes we have to really, search within us as it relates to what do I need to do to stop putting more on my plate than I can handle. How when will I get to a place where I'll be able to tell myself that I'm going to do something and then I do it? And I think that comes with boundaries and balance, because you got to do what you say you're going to do. And when we talk about character, right? Doing what you say you're going to do is part of integrity. But we oftentimes look at that as if in integrity with other people. Like if we make commitments with other people, we have to honor those commitments because we made them with other people. But what about with yourself? What about you honoring the commitment that you've made to yourself? But we've already talked about, before you make a commitment to yourself, make sure that you have the capacity and the competence and the commitment level to make it. If you know you're not motivated, then don't say you're going to do it. You're not ready. It's not something you want to do right now. Sometimes we say, I want to do this. Let's just say we want to lose weight, right? We say we want to do it. We say that we are passionate. Now, before I say this, everybody has their own situation as it relates to weight loss. There are a lot of things associated with weight loss. And so I want to be sensitive to that because, I want to be clear on what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that oftentimes we make commitments and we really may not be at a place emotionally and mentally where we're prepared to carry that commitment level out. And so what I am simply saying is the boundaries come when if you know you're not ready to do it, then don't say you're going to do it. Don't say that this is something that you want to do when really you don't. You got to be honest with yourself. We're talking about honesty in the areas of your commitment level, your capacity, and your competence. And sometimes we say, we want to do something, but do you really want it? Do you really want it? And that's a question that you have to ask yourself, because sometimes the things that we want, it requires us to change. And some of us are too comfortable to change. And we don't want to change, but yet we want a different result. Again, I'm talking about evaluating your capacity, evaluating your commitment level, and also evaluating your competence. And so these are things that I really want you to think about as it relates to boundaries and balance in your life, because you have to be honest with yourself. This is not, one of those messages where I'm saying, and it is true, the art of saying no to others and being able to not allow people to draw more of you than you're willing to give them. All of those things are important. We have to set boundaries with people. We have to be honest with people with where we are, so that they are clear on what we can do and what we won't do. So that that is given. But what I'm talking about tonight is those internal boundaries and areas in our lives that has to be established, so that we can be good to ourselves, so that we can honor our commitments, so that we can be better to other people. Because I believe when there is, honesty with self as it relates to our capacity, our commitment, and our competence, it helps us to be better with other people, because we won't, convey that we can do more, right, than we really can. This kind of puts me in mind of something that was told to me, many years ago. And I was in a situation where I was talking to this woman. I think it was like a mother of the church, and I was just complaining my little heart out. I didn't like this, and I'm tired of this, and I was just complaining, and woe it's me, and how I want things to be so differently. And that mother looked at me. She looked me dead in my eyes. She stopped me from talking, and she said, "Ebony, if you don't like it, change it." She said, "If you don't like it, change it." And that was so simple and so practical, but yet so powerful. How many of us complain about things, but yet we don't change them? Who does that? We complain, but we don't do what it takes to change what it is that we're complaining about. Now, again, I know that there are some things that we don't have control over, but then there are things that we do have control over. So if you look in your life, we're still talking about boundaries and balance. So when you look in your life, all the things in your life that you do not like, that you can control, are you in the process of changing them? Or are you just complaining about them? We're still talking about boundaries and balance, because it's an internal thing first. And oftentimes we don't see it that way, because we allow ourselves to be the victim and we blame other people for things that we have control over. And so, I think this is something that, we all struggle with at times, but we don't always admit that the responsibility level comes from us. The major responsibility to change those things in our lives that we have control over, they have to change, and sometimes we struggle with, and I see in the comments in terms of the commitment that we have to ourselves. And a lot of times people, they say that, it's hard to commit to yourself. And so I want to know why. Why is it hard to follow through on a commitment to yourself? Now, I'm not implying that it's not hard for all of us, right? Because there are times in our lives where we don't do that. But I just wanted to ask, because we are in dialogue, or maybe you will be during the replay. But why is it so hard to make a commitment to yourself and follow it and honor it and follow through? What stops you? Because sometimes when we think about what hinders us, we think about those external things. But, what are the internal battles that stop you from really honoring your commitment? Is it fear? Is it you're comfortable? Is it, feeling like it can't be accomplished? What are those things that would stop you from really honoring your commitment to yourself? It's something that I want you to think about. This one of the reasons why I felt like, this was such an important topic is because, I have been saying, and so many people have been saying during this season, is that, we all see the changes that are occurring in our nation and in our communities, in our in our jobs, our particular fields. There's so much change going on, and because of the significance of what's happening, there's so little that we have control over right now, right? Which makes it so much more important for you to gain a better grasp of your internal world so that you can begin to change the things in your life that needs to be changed. Because the idea is this: everything is changing around us. And so we have to also change. We have to also shift. We have to also think about what our life will look like now, and what are those things that we have to begin to change in order to have and make a better life for ourselves. We don't have to put on this, carry this life load of martyrdom. This whole thing where I worry about everybody else but not myself. That's not a badge of honor. That's not something to be proud of. So in this season of our lives, we have to tap into the strength of God to really begin to help us to get out of those beliefs and those behavior patterns that has crippled us in the past. And this is not just, this is our internal world, which affects our business, which affects our ministry, which affects our employment, which affects our family and our home lives. Our internal world impacts the way that we respond to every aspect of our lives. And so now more than ever, we have to begin to gain a better grasp of what that internal world looks like. What should our life look like from this point forward? You decide and create the life that you desire. No one is saying that there aren't challenges with that. No one is, because some people like, well, you don't know what I deal with, or your situation is not like mine. Everybody's situation is unique. And so I am challenging you to find your capacity and your commitment level. Identify what your commitment level is. What is your competence? I want you to identify those areas and then begin to use it to change your life. Use it to make your life better. And I cannot say enough how oftentimes we complain about things, but yet we don't change them. And so that goes back to our commitment level. Maybe you're not ready for that thing that you say you want. You say you want it, but from a mental and physical aspect or emotional aspect, it may not be something you are prepared for yet. And if that is the case, that's okay. Admit that. Be honest about that. And some may not agree with that, but we have to begin to check our capacity level, our competence, and our commitment level. If it's not there, it's not there. Think about that relationship that you need to get out of. You know that it's not a good environment for you. You know that it's not the best for you in this season of your life, but you haven't made the decision to leave the relationship. Why is that? Is it because you can't? Or is it because you won't? Those are things that we really have to think about. We really have to think about, I know that this relationship is bad, but do I really want to be in it? Maybe I still want it even though it's not good for me. And this is something that I even talk about, in my sessions, because sometimes people are in situations that although they know it's not good for them, they still desire it. And sometimes we have to even, get to the point of honesty in terms of why you still there. And sometimes it boils down to because I don't want to leave yet. I know it's not good for me, but I don't want it. It goes back to me saying to you, we have to always we have to check our capacity. We have to check our commitment level. Do you really want what you say you want? Are you willing to make the necessary changes to get what you say you want? Right? And then you got to check your competence level. Do you have enough knowledge to do what it is you say you want to do? Right? Because sometimes we might want to do something, but we haven't counted the costs yet. We don't know what it will entail. And so again, you have to check those things. We're still talking about boundaries and balance because sometimes we're making commitments and we haven't even counted the costs yet. So maybe we need to backtrack and really check out what our commitments are and really discern that commitment level, that capacity, right? And that competence. Those are things that we need to really look at. And then we can start being better to ourselves in saying, right? Saying and doing, because sometimes we can say something, but it doesn't mean that we're there emotionally. Have you ever done that where you're like, I ain't taking it. No, I'm not. But in your mind and either in your heart, you could be saying from a mental perspective, I'm not going to take that. That's not going to happen. But then your heart is like, okay, maybe just one more time. You got to check it. Where are you? What do you really want? So we're still talking about balance and we're still talking about boundaries. And people might be saying, Ebony, what does that have to do with boundaries? It has a lot to do with boundaries. But because before you can even begin to assess, whether or not you're going to say no about something or, in order for you to even assess whether or not you want something, you have to think about capacity. You have to think about your commitment level. You have to think about your competence, whether or not you know how to do what you're talking about. And so these are the things that you have to begin to look at. And then you have to begin to prioritize. Am I putting too much on my plate? It goes back to capacity. Can I really handle what I want? Sometimes we want things that we can't handle. For example, some of us, we want to be business owners. But can you handle it? Can you handle the ups and downs, the highs and lows of being a business owner? We're talking about boundaries here. Some of us want to be married, but can you handle the highs or lows that comes with marriage? Can you handle the sacrifice and the compromise and the honesty and transparency that comes with marriage? Can you handle that? Some of us want kids. Can you handle that? So when we talk about boundaries and balance, we're still measuring capacity, competence, and our commitment level. And so these are things that we do from an internal place before we respond to them externally. It's an internal matter, right, that has to be assessed and addressed, and then you respond to it externally. Sometimes some of us are extremely impulsive. We act on a whim. We get an idea and then we're like, we just do it. And being spontaneous is good in its place, but it can get you in a lot of trouble because you can get way in over your head. We're still talking about boundaries and balance. You can get way in over your head and recognize, I'm in too deep. How do I get out of this thing that I put myself in? So I really think that this is, these are areas that every one of us can find ourselves in. But I can't say enough when it comes to getting things done when you're done. You have to learn how to get out of that emotional roller coaster place and get to a place where you are strategizing, where you are, prioritizing and looking at what can I do now as opposed to what can wait, or how much can I handle as opposed to how much can I ask for help in. You really have to begin to assess, whatever that matter is so that you can get it done, even though emotionally you're done. And then also when we're talking about balance and boundaries internally, we're talking about you having the ability to always measure your capacity, your commitment level, and also your competence. I hope that this has been helpful to someone. I saw some of the comments. Maybe someone will kind of catch this on the replay. I hope that you have an amazing day and God bless you.